Welcome to the joint webinar from Neuxpower and Dragon Slayer Consulting. What to do about the file bloat plague decimating backup and restore. So what is file bloat? Also known as insidious file size creep, and you've all seen it. You notice that your PowerPoints, Excel files, and Word documents continuously get bigger, month over month, year over year. And you don't know why they're getting bigger. Well, it's a direct result of inefficient software that does not optimize the file. And it puts stuff in the files. Higher resolution that you may need, or pointless data baggage, or junk data, or superfluous redundant data. It consistently does this in your Excel and PowerPoints and Words and JPEGs. And you never notice what's going on because you don't see it in the data, but it makes the files bigger. What does this mean when it comes to backup? Pretty obviously, there are severe consequences. You're going to see patently slower backups. Bigger files means more data. More data means more data to back up. More data to back up takes more time. There is no free lunch. If you have more data to back up, it's a longer backup time. If you have longer backup times, and add to that the consistent growth of data that we're seeing, the explosion in unstructured data. But restore consequences are worse because restores are always urgent. When you're restoring your data, it means you got to have your data now. And the last time you want to find out that the data is not restorable is when you need to. Exceedingly long restores or recovery time objective, RTO. Recoveries include unwanted and unnecessary data. You just want to recover your data. Do you really want to recover the bloat that takes much longer to recover that data, and as a result you're waiting on data you need because you're recovering data you don't care about? Don't think so. More data, as I said, equals longer recovery times. Longer recovery times equals unhappy users, unhappy customers, and unhappy executives. File bloat at the end of the day wastes a lot of time and money. Lost time is a non-recoverable resource. You can never get it back. Once time is spent, it's gone forever. And it leads to decisively slower backup and restores. And the problem is growing worse. There are over 100 million Microsoft Office documents created every day. That's per Forrester research. Per IDC, more than 161 exabytes of digital information was created last year. That's more than 3 million times the information in all the books that was ever written. And per Tenasia Group, more than half of new corporate data growth is of the unstructured data type that we're talking about, like Microsoft Office documents. And that's set to grow at nearly 100% per year. Now, common workarounds are only a partial solution. Data deduplication or compression. They work great on backups after the first backup. So they'll reduce backup times in Windows on those, but only on duplicate files or blocks. When it comes to recovery, doesn't do a thing. Your recoveries are going to be much longer because you're consistently recovering data you don't need, you don't want, and it slows you down. So your RTOs are always going to be longer. And remember, that's the part that you can't afford for it to be longer. Deduplication essentially just gets rid of fat copies. You still got to reconstitute those copies to be read. So even though you may be improving your backup windows over time because you're getting rid of deduplicated copies, which occur a lot in backup and snapshots and replication, you're not going to do anything about it on recovery because you still have to recover all that data. Not just copies of it, but fat copies of it. It has severe limitations. As I said, it works great on the first backup and all the duplicates, but doesn't do much for recovery. So restoring your data, you're going to have even longer latency because you got to restore it from the deduplication, and it's going to take much longer. It doesn't do anything about file bloat. File bloat still remains. What about compression? Well, compression just hides the fat. It too has to be reconstituted to be read. At the end of the day, you're going to have to read all that data to recover it again, and you're adding latency. So again, there are compression limitations. Works great on reducing the backup data size when you're doing backups, you're going to have less data to back up, but when you're doing recoveries, you still have to recover all that data, and you're adding latency, making that restoring process that much longer. File bloat still remains. You're not dealing with the problem. You're dealing with only one symptom of the problem, which is on the backup side. You have to remember that backup is a means to recovery. The ends are the recovery. Backup is a necessary and important task, so dedupe and compression do help on a necessary important task, but they do nothing for recovery. And the purpose of backup is to recover data. The worst time, as I said earlier, to find out recoveries take too long is when you need to recover. There has to be a better way. Now to tell you about the better way is Mike Power, CEO and President of Neuxpower. Mike?
Thanks, Mark, for telling us about the problems of file bloat and their effect on backup. I'd like to talk about file optimization, a completely new approach to data reduction that allows you to cut file bloat at the source. Information Week describes our technology as wringing files out, shaking unneeded bytes out of graphics and included objects to radically reduce their size without affecting their appearance. The key to Neuxpower file optimization software is that it's lossy. This may sound a little dangerous, but the data that we're removing is gratuitous. It's unnecessary baggage that nobody actually needs. And we do this taking great pains to make sure we don't compromise the visual integrity of your files. By that, I mean that the optimized files should look and feel identical to the originals in every way. They'll just be a lot smaller. Lossy technology is the only way to reduce file bloat, and because we're tackling the problem at the source, those reductions will be passed on and will enhance the effects of both dedupe and compression. Let me give you an example of the kind of fat Neuxpower is able to eliminate. Modern digital cameras these days create huge JPEGs, and when people paste these into documents, they tend to be a lot larger than they need to be, and then consequently then so are the documents. Not a huge problem in isolation, but when you multiply that by tens of images per document, hundreds of documents per user, and maybe thousands of users on a network, it can add up to be a pretty huge problem. Neuxpower will find every single one of those images and make sure they're exactly the size they need to be and no bigger. And the net result of that is a huge reduction in the storage consumed by the documents. An added bonus is that the files remain in their original format, which means you don't need to decompress them. You don't need any special software to view or edit them. Optimized files are the original files, just without the junk. Neuxpower currently optimizes PowerPoint, Word, Excel and JPEG files. And we picked those in particular because they are the biggest contributors to storage consumption. They tend to be the most bloated files, and they are certainly the most prolific. So what kind of reductions can you expect on these file types? Well, in 2007, the Coalition Navies independently tested Neuxpower and recorded average file size reductions of 68% for Word, 76% for Excel, and an amazing 84% for PowerPoint. And these savings will translate typically into 30 to 40% overall storage reduction for most organizations. Our desktop solution is used by over 1 million people worldwide. It's been deployed extensively by many of the world's leading organizations. It's been tested, accredited, and heavily adopted by major defense organizations around the world, including the US Army, Air Force, and Navy. In conclusion, file bloat leads to slower backups, and slower backups mean missed windows, longer restores, and ultimately wasted time and money. Dedupe and compression don't fix file bloat. Neuxpower does.